In August 1914, a woman walked into a bank in Berlin with a gold coin and walked out with a piece of paper that would soon become worthless. 9 years later, that same paper was cheaper than firewood, and a single loaf of bread cost 100 billion marks. Welcome to Ledger and Legend, where we open the archives to reveal what happens when the very mechanism of trust collapses. Tonight marks the premiere of our new series, When Money Breaks, exploring how an industrial superpower destroyed its own currency in less than a decade. If you want to master the hidden patterns of monetary history, hit subscribe now and join us for this journey. Before that summer afternoon, every paper mark in circulation was backed by solid gold resting in the vaults of Frankfurt. On that single fateful day, the German Reichstag voted to suspend the gold standard, promising it was only temporary. After that vote, the mark was backed by nothing more than the promise of a government at war. This is the story of millions of families who did everything right, only to wake up and find their life savings could not buy an egg. To understand how money dies, we must first look at how governments lie to themselves when wars begin. When World War I broke out, Britain and France raised taxes to pay for the ammunition. Germany chose a very different path. The imperial government believed the war would be short, victorious, and fully paid for by indemnities imposed on defeated enemies. So instead of taxing its citizens, the Reichsbank simply printed paper money to pay for every rifle, shell, and uniform. During the 4 years of fighting, the amount of paper money in circulation increased by more than 400%. Yet prices remained relatively stable during the war itself because citizens held onto their paper out of patriotic duty. They believed that once peace returned, their government would honor every single banknote with real gold. That belief was the invisible bridge holding the entire structure in midair. In November 1918, the war ended in total defeat, and the invisible bridge collapsed. The empire was gone, replaced by a fragile young republic born in the middle of chaos and revolution. The new Weimar government inherited a country devastated by 4 years of conflict and debt, and then came the demand for reparations. In 1921, the Allied powers set the final reparations bill at 132 billion gold marks. It was a figure designed to exceed Germany's total capacity to pay, payable only in gold or hard foreign currencies. Germany had no gold, and its export industries were shattered. The government faced a choice that every central bank in crisis eventually confronts: admit bankruptcy, default on debts, and raise taxes on a starving population. Or print more paper to buy foreign currency on the open market, hoping tomorrow would bring a miracle. They chose the printing press. When you print paper money to buy real gold or foreign exchange, the foreign exchange becomes instantly more expensive. The more paper marks the Reichsbank printed, the less each individual mark was worth abroad. By 1922, the exchange rate was dropping not by the month, but by the day. Yet official policy remained stubbornly unchanged. Rudolf Havenstein, president of the Reichsbank, insisted that the shortage of money was the real problem. He argued that as prices rose, the central bank had a duty to print even more cash so people could pay their bills. It was the classic delusion of every hyperinflation in human history, mistaking the volume of paper for actual value. In January 1923, the crisis reached a point of no return. When Germany defaulted on a delivery of timber and telegraph poles, French and Belgian troops marched into the Ruhr Valley. The Ruhr was the industrial heartland of Germany, producing the nation's coal, steel, and industrial wealth. The French army occupied the factories, intent on taking reparations directly from the mines. The German government responded not with weapons, but with passive resistance. They ordered the coal miners and steelworkers of the Ruhr to lay down their tools and go on strike. And to support the millions of striking workers and their families, the government promised to pay their full wages. With zero tax revenue coming from the occupied heartland, There was only one way to pay those wages. The printing presses were turned to maximum speed. By the summer of 1923, the mathematical avalanche was completely out of control. What had been a quiet decline became a vertical cliff. 30 paper mills were working around the clock exclusively to supply paper for banknotes. 29 printing firms and more than 2,000 printing presses were running day and night for the Reichsbank. Engineers designed new plates with higher denomination zeros added every few weeks. First thousands, then millions, then billions, and finally trillions of marks on a single bill. The reverse side of many notes was left completely blank because there was no time to print both sides. In Berlin, a loaf of bread that cost 1 mark before the war reached 100 billion marks by October. A cup of coffee doubled in price while a customer was sitting at the cafe table drinking it. Workers were paid twice a day and immediately given 30 minutes of leave to run to the stores. If they waited until the end of the shift, their entire day's labor would not buy a single egg. Karl, a baker in Berlin, opened his shop every morning at 6 o'clock to a line of anxious neighbors. He had to rewrite his price chalkboard 3 times before noon. Customers brought laundry baskets, leather suitcases, and wooden wheelbarrows filled to the brim with paper cash. The paper itself had become worth less than the ink printed upon it. Robbers would steal a wheelbarrow left outside a shop, tip out the mountain of cash, and flee with the empty wooden cart. Children built toy pyramids out of bundles of million-mark notes in the gutters. Housewives used stacks of worthless currency as kindling to start their kitchen stoves because paper money was cheaper than firewood. Thrifty families used sheets of 1,000-mark notes as wallpaper to insulate drafty bedroom walls. Barter replaced the currency across entire towns and countryside villages. A haircut cost 2 eggs. A shoe shine cost a lump of butter. Karl the baker accepted a pair of leather boots in exchange for 3 loaves of rye bread. Foreigners holding American dollars or British pounds lived like royalty in luxury hotels for a few cents a day, while middle-class German families sold off heirlooms, silver spoons, and grand pianos just to buy flour. If you enjoy deep dives into how monetary history shapes our present, take a second to hit the like button. Your support helps Ledger and Legend bring more independent, uncompromised historical research to light. Underneath the daily absurdity, a profound social transformation was taking place. Hyperinflation did not destroy everyone equally. It acted as a massive, violent engine for the redistribution of wealth. Every family that had saved prudently for 30 years in government bonds or bank accounts saw their savings wiped out completely. Old age pensions, insurance policies, and fixed mortgages became mathematically zero. Retirees who had planned a comfortable, quiet life were forced to beg on street corners. Meanwhile, speculators and debtors experienced a sudden, unbelievable windfall. Industrialists who had borrowed billions of marks to buy factories paid off their entire loans with the value of a single box of matches. Hugo Stinnes, an industrial tycoon, built a vast empire by borrowing paper marks to purchase real physical assets, land, and ships. He understood that debt disappears in a hyperinflation, while real assets remain. The moral fabric of society began to fray at every seam. Thrift, discipline, and hard work, the traditional virtues of German culture, were revealed to be foolish traps, while gambling, immediate consumption, and reckless speculation were rewarded. People realized that keeping money in a bank was an act of financial suicide. The psychological shock destroyed trust in institutions for generations. A society without a reliable unit of account loses its anchor. Trade becomes an exercise in desperation and deception. When a currency dies, it is not primarily a failure of economics. It is the complete breakdown of a social contract. Money is not a physical object, nor is it a mathematical formula. Money is a shared hallucination, a collective agreement that a piece of paper will be accepted by someone else tomorrow. When that collective agreement breaks, human behavior transforms rapidly. By autumn 1923, farmers in the German countryside refused to send grain into the cities. They would not trade their real wheat and livestock for paper that would lose half its purchasing power by nightfall. Food shortages gripped Berlin, Hamburg, and Munich, leading to riots and the looting of bakeries. The state lost its most fundamental authority, the ability to maintain an orderly marketplace. In regional cities, local municipalities, railway companies, and large factories began printing their own emergency money, called Notgeld. Thousands of different emergency currencies circulated simultaneously, made of aluminum, silk, wood, and even leather. The monetary geography of the nation fractured into thousands of chaotic pieces. In Munich, political extremists began organizing openly in beer halls, finding eager listeners among ruined middle-class veterans. A young Adolf Hitler realized that the destruction of the middle class was his greatest political opportunity. The moral bankruptcy of the Weimar Republic was linked forever in the public mind with democratic governance. People who had lost everything did not blame the war or the central bank. They blamed the republic itself. They longed for a strong figure who would sweep away the disorder and restore stability by force. In Berlin, Rudolf Havenstein remained in his office at the Reichsbank, supervising 30 printing factories. He believed he was performing a patriotic duty by providing the liquidity the economy demanded. When criticized by foreign economists, he replied that the central bank could not allow the nation's businesses to collapse for lack of legal tender. He was blind to the feedback loop he was perpetuating. The more cash he issued, the faster velocity increased, and the higher prices surged. In November 1923, the total amount of paper money reached 400 quintillion marks. A single US dollar was worth 4.2 trillion German marks. The numbers had ceased to have any human meaning. Payroll departments stopped counting individual bills and began weighing stacks of banknotes on industrial scales. Bank tellers no longer kept ledgers of individual accounts. They simply stored paper bales in vaulted rooms. Robert, our quiet keeper of records, sat at his desk beside the candle, watching an entire nation's books turn to ash. For 200 years in our series, he had recorded ledgers kept by kings, central bankers, and merchants. He had seen currencies debased by melting silver and clipping gold edges. But he had never seen a record book destroyed by sheer mathematical infinity. He lifted his pen above the page, unable to write a number with 12 trailing zeros that would mean nothing by sunrise. The ledger of the German mark was closed not by choice, but by absurdity. On November 20th, 1923, Rudolf Havenstein died suddenly of a heart attack in Berlin. The man who had overseen the greatest monetary expansion in history died just as the system reached absolute zero. His death cleared the way for a radical change in leadership. The nation stood on the precipice of total economic dissolution. Factories ceased production because prices changed before orders could be delivered. Farmers guarded their crops with pitchforks against desperate urban crowds. The central authority had lost the power to levy taxes or enforce contracts. Without a stable currency, the modern state decomposes into local fiefdoms. A solution was required that defied orthodox economic theory. It required a leader who understood the psychology of trust. To save the nation from complete disintegration, the government appointed Hjalmar Schacht as special currency commissioner. Schacht was a brilliant, pragmatic economist with an unyielding personality and a high starched collar. He understood a fundamental truth that Havenstein had never grasped. To create a new money, you do not need gold in a vault. You need to create a psychological belief in scarcity. On November 15th, 1923, Schacht executed what history calls the miracle of the Rentenmark. He created a completely new currency called the Rentenmark, entirely separate from the old, ruined Reichsmark. Because Germany had no gold reserves, Schacht backed the Rentenmark with a legal mortgage on all agricultural land and industrial property in Germany. The new note was not redeemable in gold, but in land-backed bonds. It was a legal fiction, but it was a brilliant psychological anchor. Schacht set the conversion rate at 1 Rentenmark to 1 trillion old paper marks. He chopped 12 zeros off the national account books in a single afternoon. Crucially, Schacht placed a strict absolute legal ceiling on the total issue of Rentenmarks. The central bank was forbidden by law from printing a single note beyond the capped limit to finance government deficits. When politicians came to Schacht begging for emergency funds to pay civil servants, he flatly refused. He told the government that if they spent more than they collected in taxes, they would have to lay off workers. The printing press was officially turned off. What happened next stunned economists across the world. The moment people realized no more Rentenmarks could be printed, confidence returned almost overnight. Farmers brought their grain back to the cities. Shopkeepers stabilized their price boards. Foreign exchange rates leveled out instantly. Hyperinflation ended not over years, but in a matter of days. It proved that inflation is not an act of God or a natural disaster. It is a political decision, and it ends the moment political will enforces scarcity. Yet, despite the success of the Rentenmark, the trauma of 1923 left a permanent scar on the German psyche. An entire generation had learned that hard work and saving could be erased overnight by government policy. The middle class, the traditional anchor of democratic stability, had been financially destroyed and emotionally alienated. 10 years later, when the Great Depression struck, those same ruined families looked for a radical savior. The shadow of the hyperinflation fell directly across the path that led to World War II. In the aftermath of the monetary reform, society struggled to rebuild basic trust. Businesses reopened with clear prices, but the social division remained deep. Those who had lost their homes and life savings could never regain what was lost. The memory of wheelbarrows full of money became a legendary caution passed down through families. Schacht proved that money lives and dies in the minds of the people who use it. Without faith, paper is merely wood pulp and dye. With faith, a simple token can move entire global markets. The story of Weimar Germany became the textbook study for every economic institution that followed. Central banks across the 20th century built their mandates around avoiding this single catastrophic failure. Yet the mechanisms of debt creation continue to evolve in new digital forms. Understanding 1923 is not just studying history, it is studying the architecture of modern credit. When balance sheets expand endlessly, paper value becomes an illusion once more. As we review this historic chapter on ledger and legend, let us separate the documented facts from popular myths. Myth 1. Hyperinflation was caused entirely by Allied war reparations. Fact. While reparations placed heavy pressure on foreign exchange, the primary cause was internal government spending funded by printed money during and after World War I. Myth 2. Printing money was the only choice available to the Weimar government. Fact. They could have raised taxes or cut spending, but chose inflation because it was politically easier than confronting the public with austerity. Myth 3. Hyperinflation affects everyone equally. Fact. It destroyed savers and pensioners while enriching large borrowers, real asset owners, and agile speculators. Myth 4. You need physical gold to stop hyperinflation. Fact. Schacht stopped hyperinflation with the Rentenmark without a single ounce of gold, using psychological anchoring and strict supply limits. Myth 5. Modern central banks could never make the same mistake. Fact. While mechanisms differ today, the temptation to monetize government debt remains the fundamental risk of all fiat systems. Every story in our series returns to the same core question: who keeps the book, and what prevents them from changing the entries? In Episode 6, we saw how Bitcoin attempted to solve this by creating a ledger with no central keeper at all. In this premiere of Season 2, we saw what happens when a traditional central keeper abuses the power of the ledger until the entries mean nothing. The Weimar Hyperinflation remains the ultimate warning about the fragility of unbacked paper money. When money breaks, it is never just an economic inconvenience. It breaks families, erases trust between neighbors, and shatters the political foundation of society. Which leaves us with a vital question for our own time. When modern governments accumulate debts larger than their economies, will they find the discipline to pay them through taxation or the temptation to print? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every response on Ledger and Legend. If you found this exploration valuable, please subscribe, share this video, and join us next week for Chapter 2 of When Money Breaks. Thank you for watching Ledger and Legend. Until next time, keep an eye on who holds the book. We appreciate your company as we unravel the financial mysteries that shaped the modern world. Remember that historical patterns often repeat in subtle, unexpected ways. Staying informed and understanding monetary principles is your best defense in an uncertain financial landscape. Join our community of curious minds by turning on channel notifications today. We will continue to bring you rigorous, engaging historical analyses every week. Until our next journey through the archives, stay vigilant and keep questioning the value of the paper in your wallet. Good night from Ledger and Legend. See you in the next episode of When Money Breaks. Keep learning, keep exploring, and stay curious. The ledger of history is always open for those who choose to read it. Thank you for being part of our story. We look forward to seeing you in the comments section below.